still anybody's race here. I see a bullet bill on the mini map. No blue shell just yet, but very likely in the next 20 seconds or so. Yep, right here. Here we go. It's on the mini map. It's coming through. It is gonna go for Kevo. He has a couple options here. He could go for a mushroom dodge right there. Oh, he did it!
Avoids the blue shell with the mushroom, baby!
Dodge. Oh, it's woo! Sorry.
Kevo showing us how it's done.
Oh.
This is good commentary. This was fun, and this was Nintendo approved. And I think that this PAX East event is exactly the type of thing we need to focus on if we want this game to start taking off outside of our online community bubble. There were a lot of people not familiar with the online competitive scene watching this tournament because, well, you know, Nintendo was the host, that brings them here. And it was an introduction in a sense, and to many of these players, it is all luck. But to those who have been around, it is not exactly a big surprise that Kevo came out on top by a solid margin. He's one of the best players in the world after all. This tournament was a lot more about future possibilities than the actual result, however. It was about Nintendo hosting something for the people who care about this game, and it was about making a lasting impression. As a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to tournament organization, I was pleasantly surprised from what I heard. If you watched my earlier stuff, you would know that I really think the in-game tournament mode is not ideal whatsoever when being used as a tournament, ironically. But using the tournament mode as a qualifier works quite well, and I actually really liked that they held a play-in tournament at PAX to determine the final 6 slots. Of course, this was because they crushed it with the play-in tournament as well. They had 144 players per wave, top 4 advancing to a round of 48, then top 3 advancing to a final 12, where the top 3 in both waves qualify to join the 6 who were flown out from the tournament mode qualifiers. There were 48 setups, all on LAN mode, so they were able to run 4 rooms at a time seamlessly without connection issues. They essentially ran one of our classic free-for-all tournaments, albeit with some stricter advancement rules. There were 12 races in the finals also, allowing for a sufficient sample of races to help luck balance out. It's almost like they watched our stuff and knew the drill, and that's just so awesome. Now, don't get me started on the stream setup either. They had 12 POVs all at once, and the host did an excellent job of jumping to the right perspectives at the right time. While Nintendo has always had their way of doing things, I'm starting to realize that Mario Kart players actually have a leg up in these settings when attending Nintendo events, as opposed to Smash and Splatoon players. I believe this is because the way we play our game is much more in line with how Nintendo thinks the game should be played. We play with items on and with full lobbies. There's no reluctance to play Turf War. There's no
items. Fox only. Final destination.
The Wave 4 bounce patch makes even more sense when you consider a setting like this. The one thing they might have not liked before was how few characters dominated the metagame. They essentially fixed this problem for themselves, at least temporarily. This time, there was a wide variety of characters represented in the final. The more time that passes, the more I'm starting to think a varied meta might stick as well. I obviously cannot speak for Nintendo themselves, but I have a feeling if the online community embraces the things that they want their brand to represent, fun, togetherness, excitement, etc., these tournaments could potentially become a mainstay. And luckily, that is easy to do with a game in which so many different people can play together at the same time. Everything I've heard from the players so far is that the staff that was there was just awesome, and I'm really excited to see what happens next. Before I close out the video, I want to offer some suggestions that nobody involved in the tournament asked for, but just some things I noticed, mainly of commentary. First thing is that the tournament rounds before the finals were only 4 races. That's less than ideal, but I get it. They need to get a lot of people through the event, and everyone had a shot to get in through tournament mode technically as well, so it's hardly a critique, just pointing out that it was less than ideal. There were a few issues when it came to the qualifying rounds. One thing that was cool is that Nintendo was nice enough to supply Pro controllers at every single setup. Traditionally, our tournaments are usually bring your own controller policy, but they had everybody covered. One of the unfortunate things though is that the audio is not very good on the TVs, giving players that happen to have headphones on them a pretty massive advantage. Everybody had their own switch at their setups, so this hypothetically would not be a problem if everybody did have headphones, but this was not the case. It doesn't seem like super reasonable to say like, oh yeah, every setup should have headphones at this tournament and all of that, especially since players can't have their own, but it would be a nice touch. Additionally, from what I heard, some monitors had this smear-like effect when a bunch of action was happening on the screen at once. I don't know if this is something we would have to expect in the future or something like that, but maybe it'd be something to, check up on and all that, but almost like, the monitor couldn't keep up with all the action on the screen. And for a game like MK8, that happens a decent amount, so it is what it is, but overall, the tournament structure was sound, and I didn't hear about these issues really arising during the finals. Overall, I think the commentary was very good and engaging. In many ways, I think the online community has some catching up to do, but of course, a lot of commentators on MKC are sharing living spaces of other people and can't really go all out. But anyways, here's what I think. Understandably, MK8DX is not Jordan Kent's main game, but he can make it work just because in general he's an experienced esports commentator. The few things I would bring up though are all, game related. The first is of course keeping tabs on player characters in the standings. One notable thing I noticed was on the end of Chaco Mountain, Kevo actually made a pretty incredible comeback to pull out second. At the time he was tied with Jet for first in the standings and Jet placed 7th that race. The focus here was on Gecko for pulling out back-to-back wins, which of course was exciting, but not the highlight. This second place was actually the most significant moment of the tournament up to this point and got Kevo his first solid lead. This was actually something that was immediately approved upon later when it became apparent that Kevo was the story. Jordan questioning where Kevo was on Kalmari Desert actually set up the final plotline of the event superbly because he did reappear in first shortly after. This anticipation, if you will, led to the craziest ending of the event and it was really memorable as such. Essentially, paying attention to situation is huge. Next thing to bring up is course classification. I would be careful to label tracks into categories and would definitely avoid using the term mid, even with honest intentions as a track that benefits middle spots. While certain courses definitely provide a greater advantage of front running than others, all strategies can typically be used on each course. And I think it would be safer to say front running is good here rather than this is a front running track, namely in a chat full of people seeing high level competition for the first time. Being in first place going into lap 3 is not unlucky depending on the course. If it were a bad situation, people would actively avoid it actually. And that can happen sometimes, and create situations where nobody wants to front run. What will happen if this happens is the race will slowly progress until someone chooses to take the lead on their own accord. This player will likely do it perhaps because they like the combination of items they have, coins held, and time left in the race. There's a skill to determining when leading is good, and if they choose a bad time to be in first, often that is them making a mistake, not being unlucky. There's a lot of value to placing first since you get 3 extra points over second, so a lot of players will choose their time to strike carefully. In a game with RNG elements, a lot of people are really quick to chalk things up to luck over things that aren't actually luck. We need to be careful about using the word luck, especially when it doesn't apply, because there is a negative connotation to it. The Maple Treeway clip that played at the very beginning is a great highlight for the tournament and was an awesome moment. 99% of players would have taken the blue shell and people would have said it's unlucky because, they got hidden first. But obviously we saw that this is not always the case. Bear did a really good job of diagnosing that a blue shell was likely going to happen at some point before it was even thrown, and also realizing that Maple Treeway does have ground shrooms on occasion. The reaction by both commentators was awesome and exemplified a great strength of this team, which is understanding that not every situation is made equal. They were calm for a lot of the tournament and moderately excited when it was called for, not trying to force anything. Recognizing the hype displays and moments and responding accordingly makes the stream very fun and even helps a new spectator start to understand the game and what it's about. Like I said on Twitter, I'm still laughing at Bear losing his mind after the fact and quietly apologizing for it. It was funny. But that's all I have today. Nothing more really needs to be said. Exciting stuff, fun stream, good tournament, and I can't wait to potentially see more.